What's up everyone? So I'm going to talk about how I turned this OptiPlex 3070 micro motherboard into a little mini gaming computer. On the screen here you see we got the OptiPlex 3070 micro processor i3-9100T quad core. Heatsink is all aluminum, no pipes, stock fan, one stick of 8 GB RAM, 500 gig storage drive, integrated graphics UHD 630. The upgrades we're going to be doing is a custom case. We're going to upgrade the heatsink to a full copper with pipes and an upgraded fan. 32 gigabytes of RAM, 2x16, a 1 terabyte storage SSD. We're going to be adding a graphics card to this. It's going to be the RX 6400 4 gig over a X16 to M.2 PCIe adapter. Power supply is going to be both with a laptop charger, and then we're going to be adding some custom Wi-Fi antennas into it as well. So what you see right here is exactly how I received this motherboard. So there's literally not a whole lot to it. There's no case. We got this 500 gig hard drive. It's an old optical style drive, so it's very slow. I'm going to pull it off and then I'll show you where the Wi-Fi chip is and the M.2 PCIe Express. So on the top left there, you see the PCIe. Down here at the bottom, you see that's where our Wi-Fi is. The graphics card we're going to be using is the Swift 105 RX 6400 4 gigabyte. This is a very low profile card. It's about the size of a cell phone. It only gets power through the PCIe port. So we're going to be using a Pico power supply to provide power just to the graphics card. The next upgrade is going to be this RAM kit. We're going to be going from one 8 gigabyte stick to two 16 sticks for a total of 32 gigabytes. This is a 2600 speed CL19 RAM from Team Group. It's going to be running in dual channel instead of the stock configuration, which is only single channel. Next is going to be getting this 1 terabyte Team Group SSD. This is going to drastically improve the system overall when it comes to boot speeds and load times. Next upgrade is going to be for this Wi-Fi chip. I have these pigtail extenders with these 3M tape side ones. They're going to be routed to each side of the case that I make. The next thing is how we're going to be providing this graphics card to the rest of the system. It's going to be over this M.2 to X16 PCIe Express port. So it's a full X16 slot here, that little white piece up top. That's how we're going to get our power into the graphics card. So you take your M.2 adapter and just plug it right in and then plug your GPU into the X16 slot. Over here we have some acrylic sheets. This is what I plan on making the case out of. Got some translucent blue for the sides and then a clear for the top. I'm going to try and 3D print some brackets out and use these M4 by 12 inch machine screws. When I pull the cooler off, you could see the aluminum heatsink. It's aluminum block, aluminum fins. We're going to be upgrading that to a full copper plate, copper fins, copper heat pipes, and then we're going to be upgrading the fan as well. It's the same style fan. The blower is a little different. It's got wider and thicker fins on it. Hopefully push more airflow through it. As you can see, it's pretty much like a hybrid between a desktop and a laptop motherboard. Here's the GPU out of the box, and I'm going to be placing it next to the motherboard and how it's going to somewhat be referenced inside of a case here. So I'm going to try and get it as close as possible like that. It's about the same length. Here's pretty much the diagram of how everything is laid out. The orange on the left, that's going to be our Pico power supply. In the red, that's going to be our graphics card. The brown is our PCIe to M.2 adapter. Our SSD in red, our Wi-Fi in yellow with the antennas, and then our green is our motherboard, and then the gray on the far right is going to be our new heatsink and fan. As you see up at the top left, I have where the connectors and power ports are going to be. This image right here is pretty much everything plugged in together kind of roughly just to make sure I can get everything powered up and running. Everything's working right here, and you can see on this monitor I even got an image. So at this point I know the proof of concept is working. I just need to start assembling things together. Okay, so here's our final build. I made this case out of some acrylic sheets. Everything's hand cut, so nothing is exactly squared up, as you could see, but here's the rundown of it. So we'll start right and work our way left. So over here we got an upgraded fan. This is an OEM fan, but the blades on this one are a little bigger and thicker. The full copper heatsink is in, copper plate, copper fins, and there's 2 heat pipes, that S in here. The solid state drive, it's in there kind of iffy. This was the OEM bracket. It was this whole base plate that sat here. I just kind of mounted it, put this little rubber trim here to snug it in so it doesn't rattle around, so it's in there pretty good. The GPU, the RX 6400, it's in there pretty snug. So here's our X16 to M.2 PCIe adapter. I wonder if you can see it in there. It's right under here. Anyways, it plugs in, then it comes with this ribbon cable, comes up to the slot, and then it's getting power over here from this Pico power supply. I think this is a 90 watt Pico power supply. So normally on these Pico power supplies you get these plugs for like a power switch and stuff, and your incoming power, but I had modified that so I have a toggle switch up here to turn it on. Main power comes in through here, and then I had soldered some of the connections to it. These red tabs on the side, these are for the Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi chip is down here, and the cables are routed underneath. My power button is actually like a pen push button to a pen top. So it's in there. It works good. So some of the issues I was running into, minor issues, these brackets, I was planning on using some acrylic blocks. It ended up not working. They kept breaking and shattering. So I ended up 3D printing some, and then I don't know if it was the filament I use or what, but if you try and drill and tap into like a 3D printed part, a lot of times it splits. So I'd have to take a soldering iron, bore it out through with heat, and then make sure it's wide enough to fit one of these M4x12 screws. Also down here, because this is a 20 pin power connector, obviously this doesn't take 20 pin connector anywhere on this motherboard. It's essentially like a hybrid between a laptop board and a desktop board, because it's got a desktop style CPU, a socket and everything, but it's got some laptop components to it as well, like the memory would be laptop. These are extra ports, something that you would see on a laptop. It takes laptop power. So I had to 3D print a mount for that, so that's in there pretty good, screwed in. One of the biggest issues I was running into was power. So
this 3070 micro runs off of laptop power and voltage, which is 19.5 volts. The GPUs run off of 12 volts. So I couldn't find a power supply that I could break 19.5 down to 12. I guess I could have tried to modify one, but it wasn't it's too much of a headache, and I just decided I'll just split the power. So it technically is going to have two power cables coming in, one 19.5, one 12 volt on the side. That was probably the biggest issue I was running into, was how to split the power. But overall, it came out pretty nice. It's about the size of like an Xbox One S right now. I have a top piece for it. Top piece is off on the side. It doesn't look too pretty. I have these air vents on the sides, right over the fans for each part. The way the stuff is mounted into it, I don't know if you can see them, those standoffs in there. So the way I got the standoffs in there is I would lay my acrylic flat, I'd put the board over it, and then I'd take like a Sharpie. Hole 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And then I'd take my brass standoffs, stand them up on it, take my soldering gun, and melt them into the acrylic. So each one is in there, and when the acrylic dries, it threads itself, so you could unthread it if you need to at any point. So this is pretty much how it all came out. So we'll go through another run through. Let's look at the i3 9100T. We got 32 gigs of RAM, 1 terabyte hard drive, the RX 6400, a Pico power supply, all into this thing. It's about 2 inches tall, wide. It's about 12 inches wide. So everything fit perfectly on like a 12 by 12 acrylic sheet. Just obviously cut it off, probably like 8 inches by 12 by 2. So it came out pretty good. Here I'll show you some benchmarks on how it all performs together.
So boot time from the old hard drive to the new SSD. The old hard drive from power button to desktop was 1 minute and 50 seconds. With the SSD installed, it cut all the way down to just 17 seconds from power button to desktop. Here are the games I tested it out. Stock with the SSD and RAM, and with the SSD, RAM, and GPU, all the mods put together. So Skyrim, clear step pattern. So we have this blue 25, 43, and then 60 FPS at 1080p. Fallout New Vegas, 60 FPS, 80 FPS, and then 80 FPS on 1080p high settings. Fallout 4, 22 FPS, that was on 720 low, 30 low, and then 60 flat was on 1080p high settings. Halo Master Chief Collection, this one was kind of interesting. So I tested it mostly with Halo CE and Halo 3. So these were on the original settings. I couldn't even get it to launch in the stock configuration. After the SSD and RAM, I finally got it to run at 60 on Halo Combat Evolved, but then when I added the RX 6400, everything went bonkers and was shot up straight to 240. That was on Halo CE and Halo 3 mostly tested it on. CSGO, low settings both for the stock and for the upgraded SSD and RAM. So blue was at 60, red 90, and then with the GPU added all the upgrades, we got up to 150 FPS at 1080p with mixed settings. No one ever plays CSGO on like a standard preset. Everything's always customized to your preference. The final benchmark was 3 Mark Time Spy. As you see in the stock configuration, everything was low. Total score was 2500. The next SSD and RAM, everything again, super low, but total score went up slightly to 2700. And then with the everything upgraded, everything kind of evened out pretty level, 3200, 3200, and 3200 again. So this whole combination between the SSD, RAM, GPU, and CPU, everything matches up pretty nicely in this configuration. Thank you to everybody for watching, taking the time. Like and follow this. Hopefully this inspired somebody out there to take something and make a full custom build. You don't have to go out and spend all this ridiculous money to build a computer. You can build a computer super cheap nowadays. You just need to know where to look, what you're doing, and ask people for help. There's no issue with asking any PC community of what's better for your budget. So hopefully this video helped you. Thanks for coming to watch from start to finish, taking this OptiPlex motherboard and turning it into this nice little light gaming PC. Thanks.